Hello, and welcome to the Let Them Live podcast. I'm Emily Burning, your host, and also the president and co-founder of Let Them Live. We bring you interviews with unsung heroes and inspiring individuals who are in the fight to save babies, mothers, and fathers from abortion. Our goal is to amplify their voices and bring their stories to the forefront, shedding light on the incredible work they do and the lives they touch. This is more than just a podcast. It's a platform that allows everyone to share their pro-life stories and inspire us to passionately continue advocating for life. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us again for the Let Them Live podcast. We have a very special guest today, and every guest is special. But I really love Melissa. I love her story. I love how we met. It's seriously just one of those things where it's like a God thing where you just run into each other and then just this whole friendship is created. So I'm really excited. Thank you so much, Melissa, for being here and for just being willing to share your story to everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Emily. And the feelings are very mutual.
I love it. Yeah. So tell everyone about you. How did you come into the pro-life movement? What's your motivation and passion behind that?
Sure. My story is, I don't know that it's necessarily unique, but I feel like it's not necessarily talked about, little pieces of it, if you will. I have both a teenage pregnancy. I was 19 years old. I was an addict. I was in an abusive relationship and I found myself pregnant. I always tell people that I don't really remember how I became pro-life. I just was. I was brought up loosely Catholic, but it certainly wasn't religion that made me feel the way that I did about it. And I actually don't even know where I originally heard about abortion, but I know that I knew that it was a child and a life that I felt I didn't have the right to end. So despite circumstances that certainly made me what people would think the poster child for abortion, I chose life. I was scared. I was very scared. As I said, I was an addict. I was in an abusive relationship, but I chose life and my son was born and he is just an incredible human being. He's 27 years old now, down in Tampa getting his master's degree. And frankly, one of my best friends, honestly. I grew up with him. I always called him my little buddy because we grew up together, really. I'd like to say that everything was wonderful. And as soon as I had him, light shined and God just allowed me to see himself and everything was great. But that really wasn't the story. I was still a mess. I was not as messy, but I was still a mess. And I went back to drugs, in and out a little bit, finally got to the point where I knew that I needed to leave his father. There was no way that I was going to, frankly, even survive, I felt, if I didn't. And so I abruptly left and just as quickly got into a relationship with someone else. It was a friend from high school, someone I had known. So it felt comfortable. It felt right. And because it was all that I thought that I needed to heal, I jumped right into bed and we fell fast in love. And 3 months later, I found myself pregnant. Still feeling the same way, still feeling like abortion's not on the table, just as scared for different reasons. I had only been dating this man for 3 months, but he did everything right. And this is where I do feel like my story takes a little bit of a unique turn, or at least from what we hear mostly. He was kind, he was loving, he was gentle, he was supportive. He did and said everything that a woman would want, I think, who was scared and feeling, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And told me he wanted to marry me, that he loved me. He would do everything for me and the baby, whatever we needed. I was like, whoa, put on the brakes. But how about if I just move you in and we'll go from there? And so I did. And things were going okay, but his family was not happy. I grew up on the Cape and it's a small place and people know people. And they weren't very happy with our relationship. They weren't very happy that he was going to be, frankly, connected to the family that I had my son with, if I'm honest. And I think looking back now that I felt a lot of guilt about that. I felt a lot of guilt that this man who seemed to be making really good choices in his life got stuck, if you will, with someone who wasn't. But I didn't realize that actually until recently. So we were planning for the baby and then things started getting a little hard. Like I said, the family was putting a lot of stress on him, which in turn made me scared. And we started fighting. And I thought to myself, I have to break up with him. I can't keep this relationship. I felt like I was still in love with my son's father, which in a way I was because I was so young. We were together for 7 years. It was all I knew. And so I went to a friend's house and both she and her sister had abortions in high school. Couldn't talk about it though. That's another interesting part. My friend, you couldn't even say the word abortion around her. But yet on this day that I was at her house, I was saying, I think I'm just going to break up with him. I can be a single mom. My son is doing great. I can do this. It's going to be okay. And she assured me that she would be there for me. She would come to the hospital with me. Everything was fine, like I say, until it wasn't. And abortion came up. It came up as an option. Frankly, I really don't remember the conversation. I can't say that I was pressured in any way because I don't believe that I was, but it was just enough. It was just enough to open the door, and fear overtook me, and I felt like I had no other option. That was just what made sense. And I went home and I called Planned Parenthood, and they had quite an urgency in their tone because of how far along I was, and said, we need to get you in right away. I'm pretty sure that I was in there about 48 hours later. I don't remember a lot of that experience, but what I did remember for years was incredibly traumatic. In particular, the sound. And I've heard other women say the same thing. The sound of the machine pulling life out of my body in an unintended way. It never left me. I had PTSD. I had nightmares. I had flashbacks, recurrent dreams. It was awful. And what I tell people is it was the nail in the coffin. So I didn't have on the outside, I had a decent upbringing, but on the inside, it was rough. And there was abuse, there was neglect, there was a lot of lies. And so it started me down this path, if you will. And so the way I talk about my abortion is that it was the nail in the coffin. Whatever hope I had left for me, for my future, for my son's future, it went out the window. I felt undeserving of anything, of love, I didn't know what grace was, but I certainly didn't think I deserved it. And I felt really depressed. I ended up overdosing not that long after. And by the grace of God and God alone, I lived. But it would be over a decade that I would sit in silence over the choice that I had made. So that was the beginning.
I think that I've heard your story so many times, and I think it's so powerful because it shows just how traumatic abortion is. It's not this like quick fix, right? I'm getting so teared up because I whenever you tell your story, Melissa, I feel it. And I think about all these women that come to Let Them Live or to any organization for help that are considering abortion. And I'm like, just listen to what Melissa has to say. Please just hear like what you're not hearing from other people. And that's why it's so important that you share it. And I'm so grateful that you are so open about your abortion story, because women need to hear it. Men need to hear it. Everyone needs to know what it really is about.
Yes, it's true. And just like my friend, like I mentioned, for that decade plus, I couldn't even hear the word abortion, let alone talk about it. I lied to everyone because I was decently pregnant. I was entering, if not just in the beginning of my second trimester. And so people knew, my work knew, my family knew, my friends knew, my neighbors knew, and I couldn't bear to tell them the truth. So there were literally a very small handful of people that I kind of had to know. They helped me in one way or the other to get this abortion. Other than that, I lied. I told them all I had a miscarriage, which only contributed to the shame, because then it was like, I'm not a liar by nature. I'm just not. And to have this life-altering decision that I made have to be just hidden, because on top of it, then at some point I'd have to admit that I lied to everyone too. It was just compounded over and over. And it wasn't until many years later, I found myself in another abusive relationship. I ended up having my daughter, my amazing, incredible daughter, who's another just gift from God and just made me a grandma, actually. Yes. So that part of it was wonderful, but most abusive relationship I've ever had in my whole life. So by the time that I came out of that, I was just desperate. Like, something has to give. This can't be it. Life can't be like this. I have these two amazing children. I have this child that I lost that I can't even mourn. I don't even know that's allowed. I don't even know that's a thing. And the Lord just found me right. It was once I realized that I didn't need to clean myself up and dust myself off, right? Because that's what I thought. That's what I thought. I thought, whoever this God is that you people know, right? I don't know how to approach him because I can't possibly be worthy of the greatness that you all speak of. And that's another reason why I speak, because the reality of it is we all sin and fall short of the glory of God. That is what his word tells us, and it is true. And unfortunately, especially within the church, which is something the Lord has charged me to talk about, and it's a little frightening, I'll be honest. We need to show up. We need to do better, because it is the last place I would have gone, and it is the best and greatest thing that I needed, because it wasn't until I recognized that the Lord saw me. He saw me in that space, and he loved me right then and there, and I didn't even know it. And all I needed all along was just to turn to him. And that is why I will continue to speak, because there is freedom. There is. And the lies that are out there are just that. They are lies. Abortion is not the answer. It fixes nothing. And that man that I spoke about, it's also something the Lord has charged me to. These men deserve a voice. They do. Okay. No one gets pregnant on their own. Okay. I just had someone the other day arguing with me over the fact that sperm is what causes pregnancy. To which obviously we need this. That was I'm like, is this real? Are we actually having this conversation?
Yeah, I saw someone on TikTok. I was watching some TikToks last night, and she goes, talking about how she never really wanted to get married, and she just wanted to be independent from men and all this stuff. And she's now engaged. She's got a kid and a baby on the way. And then she goes, I didn't need a man to get pregnant. And I was like, wait a second. I'm pretty sure you do.
Mary, that was it. Just Mary. She's the only one.
Half of the equation.
Yeah, that's what I said to this girl. I was like, last I checked, the eggs were necessary. They gotta, but it's like, the reality of it is also, and since I went, so in January, so I felt really called before I started my ministry, my pro-life advocating and just going around to anyone that will let me speak, anyone that wants to give me a mic, I will take it, because people need to hear this story. And I get called a hypocrite. I get called much worse than that. And it's okay. I say to people, they say, oh, so let me get this straight. You utilized your right to choose, and now you want to tell other women not to. And I was like, exactly. I'm so glad that you're paying attention. I don't mean to be crass, but yes.
And what a better qualified person. Like, here's the thing that really irks me is that there's these standards set, like, okay, you're qualified to talk about abortion. You're not. You're a man. You can't talk about abortion. You're a woman. You had an abortion. You're not allowed to talk about abortion. It's like, of every single person that is qualified, and anyone is qualified to talk about abortion, but you and women who've had abortions, who've lived through that, like, you should have a microphone. But it is the fact that you're not shouting your abortion in a positive way that causes people to bring the hammer down on you. And that's just not okay, because your experience and what you went through is valid, and it's a very important piece of the information that's missing from the decision that a lot of women make to have abortions.
Yes. And that's the thing, is that they talk about you're pro-choice, right? And so the part that's very confusing to me is that the choice of actually choosing life is missing from that equation, because although I have people tell me, oh, not all pro-choice, you can't just say we're all pro-abortion. However, when I try to speak, oftentimes I am silenced, or I'm at least attempted to be silenced, but God is much bigger, so I'm not going to stop. The reality of it is, I'm also not an anomaly. I wish that I was. I wish that I was the only post-abortive woman who ended up with PTSD, who ended up nearly overdosing, who ended up in bed with another man and another man. I wish that I was the only one. I would be okay with that, actually. That would be great. We could close the computer, we could move on, and everything would be fine. But that's not true, actually. In actuality, there are hundreds of thousands of me's. It's just that most of them, myself included, up until just a few years ago, are so scared to talk because, for one, we're not healed. We're not healed. So they hear all these things, even from the pro-life side. Is abortion murder? I actually believe that it is. By definition, it is. It is. You are ending the life of a human being intentionally, premeditatively, and you're paying for it even. Okay. So we get that off the table. However, if I want to reach someone, the last way that I'm going to do it is to come at them talking about how they murdered their unborn child, but Jesus is ready to love them. Now, is that true? Sure. But Paul said just because something is good doesn't mean that it's beneficial. So we, on both sides, we need to change the way that we are talking, because words matter, right? The Lord spoke the world into existence with words. Our words are exceptionally important. And going back to the father piece of it, I do believe that he has called me to be a voice for the men, because I am telling you right now, the Lord said to me very clearly, you need to write that letter. And that letter was an open letter to the father of the child that I aborted.
Oh my gosh, like that, when I read it, it was just like, oh my gosh. It just, I don't even know if there's words that I can use to describe it. And that's on your Instagram, right?
Yeah, it's on my website also.
On your website. What's your website, really quick, before I forget to ask you? That way people can go there and read it. And
thank you. Yeah, it's melissamanion.com. It's me out there, and there's a link. Yeah, there's a link to my blog, which is boasting about my weaknesses, because that's what it's all about. Like, this isn't about me. It's not about me. If God can use the, frankly, hell that I have traveled through in order to help someone else, I'm here for it. Send me. That's what I keep saying. Send me. And that letter took 3 years. It took 3 years. Every time that I tried to sit down to write that letter, and I'm a writer by nature, I sit down to write and it just pours out of me, by the grace of God, of course. It's not me. But this time, everything was against me. Everything was coming against me. And I was about to launch my website and officially say, I'm here, I'm available. This is what I do. And again, so clearly I felt like God was saying to me, no, I want you to write that letter first. And I'm like, really? Like, I was in DC, I was ready to launch. I had in my mind this whole like, oh, this is how it's going to be. And I'm going to remember that it was on this day and in the March and this and that. And he said, nope. And I said, okay, all right. But that time it just came out. It just came out. And it is one of my most proud pieces of work. It really is. And instantly, I ended up also reading it on the steps of the Supreme Court, which wasn't planned. I represent also a group called Silent No More. So there are thousands of us. Go ahead and look. And the plan that they've done for the last 20 something years is you read your testimony. And I said to Georgette, the founder, I said, look, I know this is a little unorthodox, but like, I wrote this letter and I just really feel like my best friend Chris told me, you better bring that letter because you're supposed to be reading it. I see you reading it in DC. And I was like, Chris, what do you think? I'm just going to tell them they need to change the script? They made me put my thing in 3 weeks ago. And I felt so anxious. I was like, all right. So I tapped her on the shoulder and I said, hey, what do you think? And she looked at me and she said, this isn't about me. This is about God. And if he's telling you to do something, I'm not stopping.
Yeah. Who am I to stand in the way? I can't do that. I can't.
Right? When I had to read that letter less than 24 hours after I wrote it, after 3 years of trying, but I'll tell you what, like 3 or 4 different men came up to me afterwards. One couldn't even talk. Then it opened the door. I have 2 different fathers on Instagram that I now have been communicating with and who are just absolutely devastated. And there's nothing they can do. There's literally nothing they can do. And both of them said, I knew that my child was about to be slaughtered. These are the words that they used. And I couldn't save him. One of them knew it was a boy. He already had a name. He was his son. And I'll tell you, women get very angry at me when I say, listen, these men, that child did not come on its own. And I took matters into my own hands and I looked a man in the face who was happy despite unplanned, not so great circumstances, that he literally said, you and this baby mean more to me than my family. We're going to make it. It's going to be okay. And I looked him in the face one day and just shattered him. And there was nothing he could do. I can't make amends for that. So now I'm going to speak. I'm going to speak for these men because they deserve a voice and they deserve to be able to grieve too. They are fathers. They are fathers who lost their child to the choice that their child's mother made in this, what should have been the safest place for that baby. And there was nothing they could do about it.
There's a viral video. I can't remember like where it's from or when, but it's literally of a man like outside the abortion clinic begging his girlfriend to not do it, and just like the trauma that comes from that, I can't even imagine, especially when you're like, our society tells men you don't have a choice. You don't
Yeah.
get a say in this. Whoa, what? Where did that come from? Because last time I checked, like we talked about, it takes two to get pregnant, and it doesn't make sense that men don't have that option. And how it's like a different feeling, but it's like a very powerless feeling for them.
Yes,
And there may be
exactly.
nothing worse when you know that you're trying to do everything you can, like for that guy that in that video, like literally doing everything he can and nothing. Like
Son.
the
Yeah.
abortion still happens. Like how heartbreaking.
And then interestingly, conversely, because the reality is that sadly, statistics show that that 80 something percent of abortions, women have stated they felt somewhat coerced or even threatened. And I actually just saw an article the other day that Christina Bennett posted of a woman that was murdered. She was murdered. She was pregnant and wasn't going to get an abortion, and her boyfriend killed her. And I think she's even told me actually that statistically speaking, being pregnant and being murdered is actually a very high, there's actually a high rate of that. So when 80 something percent of people are saying that they felt somewhat coerced, it's this weird space that we sit in that, so we're going to ignore it on this side. We're going to ignore on this side of it the fact that women are feeling abused, they're feeling forced, they're feeling coerced, they're not feeling supported. Frankly, as you well know, I'm walking with a woman right now that her primary reason for abortion is that she doesn't feel supported by this guy, which I have told her that she is the only one that's going to have to live with this. And that if she goes forward with getting this abortion, he can just walk away, which he already has done. And she will be the one that has to live with that consequence. So those guys, we're not going to look at that, right? We're not going to look at the fact that's not choice. That's not women freely just deciding that they feel like abortion is going to be helpful for them, right? But we're going to ignore that. And also on the other side, we're going to ignore these fathers that are saying, please don't end the life of my child. I am 100% certain that if I had this man, I'll have the baby, but I can't raise the baby, that he would have been like, okay, I'll take the baby. I'm 100% certain, but I didn't give him that choice.
They need to be given the option. And I like what you talked about too, with a majority of abortions are coerced in one way or another. And this is something that I've been like thinking about for a while, because with Let Them Live, obviously we help women with that financial burden. And it's okay, if you're having an abortion because don't have the money to live, to feed another child, or even if it's just perceived, but you feel backed into a corner because of your financial situation, because of maybe your boyfriend pressuring you, because of insert reason here, that to me all seems like coercion. And for a movement that touts, like you said, freedom and choice and empowerment, and this is your time to, it's your body and you can do what you want. The reality is that's abortion's not actually what women want, especially if they're given all of their options laid out in front of them. It's not really the best option, right? And even people who support abortion, they're like, no one really wants an abortion. It's okay, let's dive into that a little bit more. Why? And if no one really wants to do that, but they're doing it anyways, that should set off some that's a red flag to me.
Red flags, as this is not supportive. We should support you in doing what you actually want to do. I had somebody the other day say it's a necessary evil. I was like, wait, do you hear what you just said? What if we made it not a necessary evil? There's a crazy concept.
That's just crazy to me. And we have to give women all of the options. And that's just not something that has happened. And give the opportunity, like you talked about, to the father of the baby to stand up. And unfortunately, not every father of every baby does that. And that's something that we've seen so many times. And that's where we as a pro-life community can come together and rally around her, like with the mom that you're helping right now. I think it's so beautiful. And you're like, I'm here. I love you. We got this. We'll figure it out together. And that's really the beauty of the movement. Like you talked about, it's not about screaming at people or saying you don't want to murder your baby, you're going to go to hell for that. Like, it's all about saying, I'm here. We're going to be okay. And I know that you've been hurt. I know that you're going through it. We're going to get you resources. We're all going to rally together. And the church as well. Like, we're going to do what we're supposed to do. God gave each and every single one of us unique gifts and talents to be used for him, not to be
Yeah.
kept to ourselves. And so in the context of the bigger pro-life movement, we have to have the church coming together to do it. And yeah, what has your experience been with that, since you have obviously had your healing from abortion, and what's that been looking like for you?
It was a little mixed at first. Admittedly, there are some churches that just say, "Oh, we're pro-life, but we don't really want to talk about that." And I could probably do an entire podcast on how I feel about that. But hey, it is what it is. I have fortunately been welcomed into a handful of churches, and I have been able to share my testimony. As a matter of fact, one of the first churches that welcomed me in gave me a whole Sunday. It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. A church in Connecticut where I'm living. And there was a woman, and I knew in my spirit that she and her husband had an abortion. I could tell at just her body language. Several people came up to me afterwards crying, but this one was different. And so, long story short, she did finally reach out to me. It was 3 months of me praying for her specifically. Didn't even know her name. Unfortunately, I was so in a whirlwind, and so many people came up to talk to me that I didn't actually get her name. So I was just praying, please, Lord, let her reach out to me. Please let her reach out to me. And she did. It was about 3 months later. And she just recently finished walking through a Forgiven and Set Free program that I was able to hook her up with a friend of mine at a pregnancy resource center, and her husband also. Yeah. 10 years it had been that she and her husband had the abortion. No one knew. I was the first person she told. So I just feel like God just keeps showing me, I need you to just keep one foot in front of the other speaking. And so subsequently, I have landed myself at an incredible church here in Connecticut. We're actually spreading all through New England. It's called Vox. And they have allowed me to actually start an Embrace Grace group ministry here. So I am stoked because, just so you understand, because you're down in Florida, right?
Yeah.
It's a very different world up here.
Yes.
And when I go knocking on doors in New England churches, they're a little like, let's pretend we're not home.
Yes, I used to live in Massachusetts and in the New England area. I moved around a little bit right after I graduated college. I went to work for the Leadership Institute, and I was their New England field representative, just helping college kids host conservative pro-life events, help them take I would help Turning Point or Students for Life groups. And so I totally understand it. And it was crazy because when I was living in Vermont, the local churches, you think they're biblically sound. You think that they're going to be pro-life. And this is just my being naive in New England. Okay. Because I go up to that church and they're just you can make the choices that you want to make. And I'm like, what is this? And so it's amazing that
God gave us free will, Emily.
Right. So I guess we could just go out and do whatever we want. So I think it's amazing that you're having that focus in on the church, and huge shout out to Embrace Grace. I think there's just such an amazing organization, and what a wonderful way to get churches involved with this mission and to connect women to the church body. It's amazing. I love seeing all the baby showers they do, and love their organization so much.
I'm extra excited because in all of Connecticut and Massachusetts, there are actually only 3 groups, and none of them are actually running right now. Yeah. Welcome to New England. And the fact that the Lord brought me here to Vox, and we have 9 locations right now and growing strong. It is a strong church, solid church. I'm so blessed. I'm actually in their building right now. They're like, of course you can use the building. Oh yeah. So my big prayer, and they already know it, is I want an Embrace Grace in every campus, every single campus. So I'm bringing it to New England.
Yes, I love that. Do it. Oh my gosh. I think it's amazing too, to just feel your passion and see you in action, because what a different person than when you had that shame and that guilt and you were lying, when you were trying to justify to yourself the abortion. But now here you are, and you're your life has totally changed, which is so beautiful and a testament to what God can really do. And you are out there and you're making a difference. And I think it's just so amazing. I have to talk about how we met, because it was you can't get any crazier, because if it had been just even 1 second later, may not have. So literally we're leaving the Renaissance or the Marriott Hotel. Yep. In DC, and I'm with Mason, pro-life Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And I'm with Ayla, one of the Let Them Live babies that we were watching for a while. and we were leaving and you saw Mason and you were, tell me what, I can't, it was all so quick.
So
You're like,
great.
Mason.
Yes, it's so great. It's like it's going to be a pivotal moment for the rest of my life. You're like, we're intertwined forever. So yeah, so the day before I had been praying outside of Planned Parenthood with Teresa and AJ and all of them. And that was amazing in and of itself. And Mason was there. And I was like, oh my gosh, hey, pro-life Spider-Man, my kids love you, whatever. And he was so cute and kind, and off we go. So later on in our condo, I said to my older of the two youngest daughters, Abby, I said, hey, sweetheart, guess what? Guess who I met this morning outside Planned Parenthood? Because they know my story, which is a whole nother cool thing, how they have embraced me and my mess. So well, shout out to the moms who have kids that they have to sit down and tell about this. But I digress. So I said to her, I met pro-life Spider-Man. And her face went, no. First she said, did you get a picture? And I was like, oh, no, I'm sorry. And she was like, I don't even want to talk about it. I'm so sorry. So fast forward, it's the next day. We go to the Rose Gala and all of that. And yeah, and I'm waiting. My husband went to get the car. And I'm sitting, I'm waiting, and I see Mason. And I see him with these two people that I didn't recognize, full disclosure, and a stroller, lumping up the stairs or whatever. And I'm like, all right, this is going to be embarrassing, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to go ask him for a picture. So I went up to Mason and was like, oh, hey, remember me? He's like, oh yeah, yesterday, praying at the Planned Parenthood. How are you? Like, yeah, so my daughter was really disappointed that I didn't get a photo with you. Would you mind? And he's no. And he's like, Emily, let her hold Ayla. And then he turns to me and he's like, Ayla's a baby that I helped save from abortion. And then you handed me Ayla, and I just broke down the whole weekend. I told you I shared that story in front of the Supreme Court, and I didn't cry until I held this baby. And I'm like looking at you guys and I'm realizing, this is let them live. This baby is living because of what we do. Like my whole body, just like I have chills all over my body. Now I showed you, I sent that text message. She sits on my desk with me every day, reminding me why I do what I do. And you guys are just, I love you guys.
I love it so much. Oh my gosh. Weirdest thing. And I hope that this all was recording. My computer, Melissa, this is so crazy. I think it got you recording everything, but I caught like the end of this because my computer it like glitched and then it like turned off. And I was like, did my computer just fry? But then it turned back on. So we're good.
Oh no, this is happening. I got lots of people praying for this interview.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. So when I hopped back on and you were still talking, I was like, yes, this is perfect. But literally, it's honestly, I just love the way we met. And I love how it was it was quick, but it was impactful. And then we like followed up like the next day or a couple days later. And then we just started talking, and we just are very similar in so many ways. And then you came out to our gala, and one thing leads to another. And here we are.
We are. Yes. I want to be arm in arm with you for the rest of the days.
I am so glad that you came on, and thank you for sharing your story. I love when you talk. Like I could just give you a microphone and just let you go, because you have such a way, like just such a passionate way of talking about this issue. And I'm just really grateful that you shared, and I'm excited for everyone to hear what you have to say, because abortion really, it affects people, like real people, just like you. And it's a story that has to be shared. So I'm so grateful. Thank you again. And again, if anyone wants to read the letter that Melissa wrote, go onto her website, her blog. It's melissamanion.com, and it's just amazing. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Let Them Live podcast. I would like to give a special shout out to Patrick at Moon Shadow Studios, who does an amazing job of editing our podcast. If you're ever in the need for a podcast editor, he is definitely the one to go to. Let Them Live is a Christian nonprofit dedicated to supporting women who are considering abortion primarily due to financial burden. 73% of women have abortions because of financial struggles, and we're here to help bridge that gap. Our goal is to provide the emotional and financial support these women need to feel empowered to choose life. If our cause resonates with you and you're interested in learning more, getting involved, or making a donation, please visit our website at www.letthemlive.org. One amazing way to contribute is by joining our Heartbeat Club, where you can become a monthly donor, and your ongoing support will ensure that we can continue helping women every single month. You can also follow us on social media to stay up to date with all the amazing stories and ways that you can be part of our mission. You can also find me on Instagram at Emily Burning. Thank you again for listening, and please join us for more upcoming inspiring stories and conversations.